Yes, I'm glad to, Mr. Griffin. This experience that you have just referred to came about in response to a letter which I had written to the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, asking certain questions and gathering certain information. And on the arrival of that letter, Dr. Johnson, who was then president of the Carnegie Endowment, telephoned me and said, did I ever come up to New York? And I said, yes, I did, more or less each weekend. And he said, well, when you're next here, will you drop in and see us? Which I did. And again, on arrival at the office of the endowment, I found myself in the presence of Dr. Joseph Johnson, the president, who was a successor to Alger Hiss, two vice presidents, and their own counsel, a partner in the firm of Sullivan and Cromwell. And Dr. Johnson said, after, again, amenities, Mr. Dodd, we have your letter. We can answer all those questions, but it'd be a great deal of trouble. And we have a counter-suggestion. And our counter-suggestion is that if you can spare a member of your staff for 2 weeks and send that member up to New York, we will give to that member a room in the library and the minute books of this foundation since its inception. And we think that whatever you want to find out or the Congress wants to find out will be obvious from those minutes. What could possibly be wrong with foundations? They do so much good. Well, in the face of that sincere conviction of Catherine's, I went out of my way not to prejudice her in any way. But I did explain to her that she couldn't possibly cover 50 years of handwritten minutes in 2 weeks. So she would have to do what we call spot reading. And I blocked out certain periods of time to concentrate on. And off she went to New York. She came back at the end of 2 weeks with the following in the way of, on dictaphone belts. We are now at the year 1908, which was the year that the Carnegie began operations. And in that year, the trustees, meeting for the first time, raised a specific question, which they discussed throughout the balance of the year in a very learned fashion. And the question is there any means known more effective than war, assuming you wish to alter the life of an entire people? And they conclude that no more effective means than war to that end is known to humanity. And finally, of course, the war is over. At that time, their interest shifts over to preventing what they call a reversion of life in the United States to what it was prior to 1914, when World War I broke out. And they arrive at that point, they come to the conclusion that to prevent a reversion, we must control education in the United States. And they realize that that's a pretty big task. So to them, it is too big for them alone, so they approach the Rockefeller Foundation with the suggestion that that portion of education which could be considered domestic be handled by the Rockefeller Foundation, and that portion which is international should be handled by the endowment. And they then decide that the key to the success of these two operations lay in an alteration of the teaching of American history.
Alice Bailey stated, in the externalization of the hierarchy, educators and psychologists of vision in every country must be mobilized, and the pattern of things to come for the children must be intelligently determined. this will have to be done on an international scale and with the wisdom which comes from a grasp of intermediate need and a far-sighted vision. Ladies and gentlemen, Lucius Trust is no fringe group. Anyone who has studied the New World Order realizes the power that is held by men such as John D. Rockefeller, Henry Kissinger, and through organizations such as the Council on Foreign Relations. These men are heavily involved with and have set up in many occasions these tax-exempt foundations which undermine the national sovereignty of many nations and draw us closer to a one-world religion enforced by a one-world government.
Now this is from Alice Bailey. She wrote The Externalization of the Hierarchy, and she was head of Lucius Trust. And Lucius Trust, as so many of you already know, is a publishing company. Lucius Publishing is a publishing company for the United Nations. And it was originally known as Lucifer Publishing and Lucifer Trust. And Alice Bailey created 140 New Age religions. And she worked for the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare in 1957, establishing educational goals that are now being implemented in the United States. For instance, Global 2000. And she writes that Freemasonry will be the universal religion. Other New Age leaders, like Benjamin Krim, also say the same thing, that Freemasonry will be the new universal religion. And she says that between the church and esoteric groups and Freemasonry, there is no disassociation between all of these. So if you're a member of a group like Freemasonry, they want you to work towards this goal of one world government and the New Age that they call the Great Plan. And Alice Bailey tells us how they're going to do this. She says, by means of the educational work of the world, the Great Lord, who she refers to in this book as Lucifer, seeks to reach those of the intelligent public who cannot be reached by means of ceremonial and symbolism as in Masonry, or by religious means and rituals as in the Church. It touches the masses and those in whom the intelligent aspects predominate. What she's telling us here is, and we'll read it again in this next one, is the three main channels through which the preparation for the New Age is going on might be regarded as the Church, the Masonic fraternity, and the educational field. We're going to get them in the churches to bring in this New Age. But not everybody goes to church. So we'll teach them in the fraternities. But not everybody goes to a Masonic lodge. So then the safety net for it all is education. We're in a period of what is called externalization of the hierarchy. They're taking what was done in secret 100 years ago, and they're externalizing what was done by the hierarchy in secret into society.
As we have already seen, The Conspiracy is Spiritual in Nature. Probably the most important book written by Alice Bailey was Externalization of the Hierarchy. This book details the setting up of a New World Order. But this is not the New World Order that many in the Truth Movement are aware of. Instead, it is a New World Order that will rise out of the ashes of the Old World Order. The old ways will be done away with in the New World Order. Evil in Bailey's writings is associated with having, quote, a nationalistic, separative, or isolationist spirit, unquote. When one compares the New World Order envisioned by Lucius Trust and the United Nations and compares it with the Venus Project, the similarities are unmistakable. The Venus Project, with its ties to the United Nations, has put forward through the Zeitgeist films the utopian dream of the elite. This has been envisioned at least since the time of Plato and was described by people such as the Rosicrucian Sir Francis Bacon. The dream of the elite is to recreate Atlantis. Alice Bailey stated in The Externalization of the Hierarchy, if this work is soundly done, then a world unity can be established which will produce right human relations, a sound world politic, a united spiritual effort, and an economic sharing which will bring to an end all competition and the present uneven distribution of the necessities of life. In the future, the contributory factor in life must be emphasized and developed. and the good of the entire family of nations must be substituted for the good of one nation or a group of nations. The resources of the entire planet must be shared collectively, and it must be increasingly realized that the products of the earth, the gifts of the soil, the intellectual heritage of the nations belong to the whole of mankind and to no one nation exclusively. Speaking in America's Assignment with Destiny, Manly P. Hall stated the following: "This vision must be communicated, it must be extended throughout human society until humanity redeems itself by the experience of enlightenment."